Humanity has always looked to the stars for enlightenment. And at last, salvation descends from bejeweled skies.
Welcome to the Objective Secure podcast. My name's Mike.
Hey, I'm Emma.
This is episode 35, Ascension. We're going to be talking Genestealer cults today, and it's not a full-blown codex review. It's focusing mainly on the deployment aspects that the Genestealer cult are going to bring to the games of Warhammer 40,000. So it is a little bit slanted 40k wise, but I think it's from a tactical discussion. There's a lot of interesting things here that may apply to other games where you do get hidden movement and hidden deployment options. So I'm just really excited about the codex, though.
Yeah, I think that something that I've talked about often is how we can maximise using strategy in order to, I guess, maximise the efficiency of your army, and this army is built for that.
Yeah, it's a really exciting codex. It's not had a great run with all its preview games I've seen online where they've lost every single game. But
That's
I think
unfortunate.
it doesn't bode well for them, does
really.
it? But I think partly it's
Although, maybe they're submarining.
four out of four of the major channels they've submarined on.
That's exactly it. They're just trying to downplay how good it actually is so they can then start playing with it and sneak in for the win.
Look, I definitely think this codex...
That's brilliant.
Well, it fits the theme for them.
Yeah.
I definitely think they're an army that a lot of people will buy into and then quickly move on from, because they are going to have a really steep learning curve. You're going to lose a lot of games before you get the swing of them and get used to the order of events and get your play down right. But I think they're going to reward players who get used to a sequence of activations that they have to perform, and they get used to the best possible way of deploying all their ambush tokens and
the combination of the different stratagems that they can use, and how they interact and how that can be maximised.
There's a lot of moving parts to this army,
There really is.
It was funny because when we were talking about this, with me trying to explain parts of it that I'm still trying to understand, I said, there's like three or four ways that they can manipulate their deployment. There's actually six plus two characters.
Yes.
That we found so far. So we're going to talk about a bunch of those in the main topic. But before we get into that, we're going to talk LVO, because this is being recorded just after LVO has finished. So we now know who the winner is. Congratulations to Brandon Grant.
Well done. Managed to pull a win at the very last minute.
It was an amazing game to watch. It was obviously streamed live on Warhammer TV Twitch, up against Alex Harrison with his mixed Eldari 7 flyer army, which on paper looked like a really bad place for Brandon to be. And Brandon lost his... it was a Catachan guard army with a Castellan Knight. So it was basically a guard army. So it wasn't... A lot of people I've seen online are calling it an Imperial Soup army. It really wasn't. It was a knight with a bunch of guardsmen. And it wasn't even optimizing for command points, because it was a single knight. And he lost the knight the top of turn 3. So he got 2 turns of fire with it before it died. And this game highlighted just how important board control in the early parts of the game were, because Brandon won it by taking out all the threats to his infantry. The planes were all anti-tank and heavy guns, and trying to kill that many infantry just wasn't going to be viable with the planes. Brandon focused on taking down the planes that were relevant to that conversation, and then was able to basically score more points every turn than Alex. I know at the bottom of 5, I think it was a 2-point lead for Brandon. From what I understand, they did play turn 6. The stream was a bit vague on the final score, but I know that when they counted it, Brandon did win it. So really good to watch. If you're a paid subscriber through Twitch or Amazon Prime, you can watch it on Twitch.
So just to recap a little bit, because LVO didn't run the same way that it has in the past. So just for people who perhaps were, I don't know, living in a bubble and missed it, normally it would be 3 days and only the top 8 go into
Day 3.
Into day 3.
Yep.
But because of the incredibly huge number of players that they had, they weren't able to do that.
Yeah, the event was originally, from what I understood, planned at 512 players.
Yeah.
Which in 2017 they were 430 or something, and 2018 they were well up in the high 400s.
Yeah.
And I think the goal of getting it to 512 was a sensible one. They'd seen growth year on year, and at 512 it meant you got a perfect one-person winner at the end of 9 rounds.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense. They ended up with 657, I think it was, in Best Coast pairings, which is just insane. But it also forced an issue.
Well, that's it. It would have meant that at the end of 9 rounds,
it was possible
to have 2 people
undefeated. Yeah. So at the end of day 2, we had 9 undefeated, and I think it was 3 that were on 5 wins and a draw.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So they took the top 4 and gave them a pass straight into the top 8. And then the remaining...
so then the next 8.
The next 8. So it was basically ranked 5 to 12.
Bottom 8 of the top 12.
They all had to play around 6.5 as a sort of a knockout thing to see who made the top 4, which meant that... and again, I can't confirm the way this was actually done because I'm not 100% sure on the rankings at the end of that round. But from what I understand, 5th place played 12th, 6th played 11th, 7th played 10th, and 8th played 9th. And I know that when we look at the top 8 that was published by Frontline Gaming, the seed 8 was actually a guy who entered that round on 5 wins and a draw.
Yeah, and I will just be honest, if I was the person who had been the 9th person in that who got knocked out, despite the fact that I got 6-0, I would be absolutely not happy at all that someone had got 5 wins and a draw and made it in ahead of me.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I feel like the...
I don't know that there's any other option unless they'd gone in and
other than just being hardcore and saying it's the top 8 by score, the end.
So you could have gone in top 8 by score, or you could have gone in saying, well, at the end of round 9, if we do have 2 people undefeated, well, then we go... we do countbacks.
Well, either that or you go late and go, you know what, we're going to do round 10.
Round. Yeah.
Single
That's
round
it.
10.
Yeah.
I feel like putting it in where they did, because obviously with the way, and assuming I'm right in the way they've matched it up, because that's the way it looks, it meant that you've got someone who's on 6 wins playing 5 and a draw for 5 and 12. You've got the same for 6 and 7 playing 10 and 11.
Yeah.
And then you've got 8 and 9 who are both on 6 wins playing each other.
Yeah.
Which means that someone ranked either 5th, 6th or 7th who was on 6 and 0 was knocked out.
Yeah,
well, they were.
Yeah.
I don't know which one it was because, like I say, this is all based on what I can gather because I can't find how that matchups were done.
I think because of the way that they had to add in a 6.5, it wasn't necessarily easy to find the information.
No, it wasn't in Best Coast pairings at all.
Yeah.
So, like as TOs, I know that we're coming off like we know better than Frontline Gaming.
Oh, no,
I'm
not saying that at all. I'm just saying that I would have been annoyed.
Yeah, look, it would have been...
Personally.
Like, if you're ranked 8th and 9th, and you say you're ranked 9th, and you beat the dude who's ranked 8th, the 8th player in that case then not getting a spot because someone on 5 and a draw pips them by beating someone above you, that'd suck.
Yeah.
And obviously TOs have to make a call on how they handle those situations, and this was obviously something that they foresaw because this wasn't something that was thrown in at the last minute. It was definitely planned and organised. It wasn't streamed, sadly. There was Pablo from Frontline Gaming with his phone walking around taking video and live streaming on their page, which was great.
I know that there was talk that they were going to put the top 12 into day 3.
Into day 3, yeah.
So I'm not sure at what point they made that decision. But obviously if they put the top 12 in, we would have been in a situation where there were potentially 2 people
12
undefeated.
becomes 6, 6 becomes 3, which means we definitely have 3 undefeated going into round 9, which means we would have needed around 10 to decide that, essentially.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would have been preferable in my mind.
They would have been exhausted.
Oh, at the end of day 2, they would have been knackered.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Definitely.
Like, absolutely. Like, it would have been those games didn't finish until 8 o'clock local time, which means that third game wouldn't have finished before 11 or something like that. And that's assuming they went straight from one game to the next.
Yeah.
Like, that could easily have gone very, very late.
That's what I'm thinking. If they went till midnight and then had to be back, what time? Monday?
No, Sunday, because they did Friday,
Oh,
Saturday,
sorry.
Sunday.
Monday our time.
I think it would have been I think the stream went live about 9:30 local time. Yeah. So, I mean, 9 games over 3 days is exhausting anyway, having done it a couple of years ago.
10 games over 3 days.
It's just bonkers.
Yeah.
I definitely think it's something that, if we were running it, or certainly if I was running it without Emma, my own personal opinion is I wouldn't have done 6.5. I would have done it differently.
Yeah, I would have been suggesting we do it differently, and whether that looked like doing maybe 4 shorter games on the first day and having longer games available for the for day 2 and 3 days. Yeah, I don't know. We're not in that situation, not in that position to be making that call. But my personal thought on it was just, it would suck if which actually happened, having someone that has on 6 wins
miss out on the final,
knocked out for the final, to have somebody on 5 wins and a draw taking their place.
And take nothing away from the guy on 5 and a draw who did make it in.
He made it in, and he did it completely legitimately.
Yeah, making it to the top 12 of LVO in a field of 650 plus is no mean feat.
Amazing.
So it is a very awkward situation, though, for any TO when you start thinking about how you break ties at the end of a round where you've got that many players. And obviously, Frankie and Reese and the guys are in a very unique situation with it being the single biggest event in the world and no one having to encounter it before.
Yeah, that's it. Having said that, they did know in advance that it was going to be 600 and something, so...
But, I mean, in past LVOs, your top 8 the year I went, you had guys who were on 5 wins and a draw making the top 8.
Yeah.
But you then didn't break 500 players, where the natural order of things would see more than 6 undefeated. And I get that the chance of having 9 undefeated is probably a small number when you actually take into account the way the game works and the way you score points and draws and all the rest of it. But it had to be something that was considered. And
also, I guess they expect a percentage of players not to turn up.
Yeah.
However,
150 would have had to have not turned up to make that work.
Quite a significant percentage.
So, no, but look, they did a fantastic job. I got to watch a big chunk of the stream. I didn't get to watch all of it.
So did I.
Yeah, when I fell asleep and it was still playing.
Still playing. Every time I woke up, I was like, it's a different game.
But it was definitely, that final game in particular was definitely worth watching, because all the comments, all the streaming stuff was, this is done. Like, this is game over. And then as the game progressed, it was like, hang on, this isn't over. This is...
Quite glad that they did actually continue stream. So with some of the other games, they're like,
they did cut some of the streams a little bit short. Yeah,
this is all done and dusted. We're moving on. Whereas, thankfully they did keep going till the end with that game to be able to show him literally clawing it back point by point by point, and knowing,
Well, on points, he was never behind that whole game.
No,
but on table,
yeah,
in theory, he was behind on the table. But interestingly, and this all comes back to deployment and whatnot, which we'll talk about in the main topic.
Yeah, see?
Total
synergy here.
It was to do with the board presence that he played in certainly in rounds 1 and 2, where he had a really good target selection, really good target priority, and was able to force the table in such a way that the planes were never able to sort of capitalise on their guns on a single target, because they were sort of spread apart, and the way that the aircraft move in 40k means that you've got very limited arcs in how you move and how far you can move. And Brandon really did play that game out really spectacularly to ensure that he had the best possible chance of winning. And
definitely played a long game.
Yeah. I think, at the bottom of every round he was winning, but in terms of table, I don't even know that Alex would have tabled him turn 7, which is obviously the final turn. And I believe that there's no random turns in ITC. I think it's a fixed 6 turns. And Brandon was ahead every turn in that game. And they did play the 6 turns, and they did finish with 2 or 3 minutes each on the chess clock. So that was really good to see, because there's been past LVOs where they've gotten to turn 3 and the game's been over. Yeah. So it's really positive to see 2 top players finishing a game on time to a natural conclusion at the high end of play. So that was exciting. Other than that, at LVO, we also had... the LVO Warhammer preview that happened the night before LVO officially kicked off. So this was on the 8th of February. And they hyped it up online, and then they gave us the previews just after they showed it at the venue itself. So we got the Age of Sigmar preview, which was new battle tones for every Grand Alliance in 2019, which is really cool. So the artwork features there's Ogre, or what I would know them as Ogre Kingdoms, and I'm sure they're not called that anymore. Chaos, Death, and Order, which is great. Flesh Eater Courts and Skaven are on the way. And the next battle tome is Blades of Khorne, which is exciting because everyone loves men in big armor and choppy things.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's never mind. Moving on.
So the good part about it is it's letting you customize a Khorne army and make it more interesting than just charging at the enemy, which is really cool. We're also going to get a new miniature for Skulltaker. This is a model that's been around now since about 5th edition in Finecast. So the sculpt's showing its age, and it was in metal, then went to Finecast, and it never really... It's quite a detailed and fiddly model with lots of chainmail and flames and stuff, so Finecast was never a great medium for it. In plastic, it looks spectacular.
Yeah, I really like that model.
And they're also giving them... They're not called Endless Spells, but they're Cornate Phenomena, I think is the way they're worded, where they're basically like every other army's fancy moving spells that move around the table. So you've got like a floating skull with blood pouring out of its eyes. You've got an axe that looks like it's rending the fabric of existence, and a big corn symbol floating on a dripping blood.
Oh, that's so funny. I thought that was an alien tentacle.
What, that?
No, the other one.
That one?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that is the axe rending reality from from the warp and cutting its way into reality.
Right, okay. No, it looks like an alien tentacle to me.
That's because we've got the Forge World
exactly
spires,
right.
the Tyranid spires.
Yep.
The fact that the axe is in the middle of it, that's what I'm thinking.
Maybe it's cutting down the alien tentacle.
Well, who's holding it? That means they're in the alien tentacle.
Well, I'd certainly be hacking if I was in an alien tentacle.
Fair call.
So when you're painting that, perhaps make sure you make it look like renting reality rather than
alien tentacle.
Alien tentacle. Okay. Don't go purple.
We're also getting the Forbidden Power expansion, which is kind of, from what I gather, it's kind of like the Endless Spell expansion that we got. What was it called? Malefic. I can't think of the name of that expansion now.
Yep, no, me neither.
The Endless Spells one that we got from the first batch of Age of Sigmar.
Mm-hmm.
So this is now the next vault opening. There's a cool little trailer video, but they haven't really told us too much about that. So that's a wait and see for 2019.
Mm-hmm.
We're also getting Warcry, which is, watching the video, it looks like it's basically Kill Team for Age of Sigmar. Yeah. It looks bigger it's bigger than Underworlds.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
But smaller than the main
Smaller
game. So it looks like a skirmish level Age of Sigmar, and it actually says it draws on the best bits of Warhammer Underworlds and Kill Team. So it is a hybrid. It's bigger than Underworlds, smaller than an army.
I suppose in Underworlds you don't necessarily have the terrain and things like that.
No, it's a board,
so
and
this is adding that in there.
And to be fair to them, it's smart because it means that those players who came in liked Underworlds. It's a board game.
The next step
the next step is buying a box set.
Yeah, totally.
Building their own models and playing with one little warband that's a bit bigger than Underworlds. Hey, what's the next step?
And there's some flexibility within that as well. Yeah. Whereas obviously with Underworlds there isn't that flexibility. So
it looks really good. Be keen to see more about that. But like I say, my assumption is it's going to be very much like the Kill Team release we've just had from 40k.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Underworlds, we've also got a new warband previewed, which is...
They look pretty darn amazing.
I can't even say this dude's name. Ilthari's Guardians, Ylthari. They're basically a Sylvaneth Tree Revenants and Sprite Revenants, which are kind of half elf, half tree.
Yeah.
I really love they look really active and really, they look like ghosts inhabiting the spirits of trees, which is kind of what they're meant to do. Huh. The only one I'm not a fan of is what I'm assuming is the sorceress.
Oh, I like that one.
With the brambles and thorns for her legs.
She's my favourite.
See, the dude with the axe just looks really nasty and scary. I really like him. And the bow, I really like the archer.
I always like bows, but no, I do like her.
See, the thorns and brambles just don't do anything for me aesthetically. I just think it's an interesting change, but I much prefer the other three to her. And I keep saying her, it might be a him, who knows?
No, well, I think the brambles make it look like she's wearing a dress. So it certainly looks feminine
Well, they've
as
all-
far as trees looking feminine or masculine go.
Well, and they've all got the long hair and the fey appearances and stuff. So who knows whether it's a he or a she? They haven't really given them names or anything in this preview. They've just kind of gone, here we go. What's really good about them is it looks like they are a really mid-range where they can kind of do everything type force. So they're not heavy hitters. They're not super
And there's
durable.
4 of them, so yeah, they're
So they're a good, solid all-round warband, which is really exciting.
Yep.
So if you're looking to turn over a new leaf and fancy branching out into the underworlds,
Oh, really?
I'm reading it. It's on their press release.
God. Puns are banned in our house. So
Yeah. Then we get the 40k releases, which they obviously left till last at LVO, which is why it's the last on this this sheet. Shadow Spear, which is the next Warhammer 40,000 box set on from Dark Imperium. Now, whether it's replacing Dark Imperium or whether it's something more like Tooth and Claw, one of the sort of campaign-style boxes, we don't know. It leads me to believe it's part of the Vigilus campaign. It's probably the next campaign box for Vigilus. We've got a video for it, which is kind of cool. It does say it's like Tooth and Claw and Wake the Dead. It doesn't really tell me what books you're getting in it, but it does say that every single model in the box is a brand new sculpt, which is really exciting. And the first of the Primaris Vanguard Marines. So we're getting more Primaris in the box. So we're getting a Primaris Space Marine Vanguard Librarian who... I've seen a lot of people love this miniature. It's very reminiscent of Ezekiel from the Dark Angels.
Mm-hmm.
I've also seen a lot of memes for him because he's he's sort of got his fingers up to his head like he's concentrating and casting a psychic power, where he might be going strong pain, powerful Panadine type stuff, where he's clutching his head with a headache. It's also interesting to see it in camouflage. It's urban camo that's been painted onto the robe in very sort of somber greys. Which we haven't really seen on Space Marines in a long time with any sort of real camouflage.
See, I reckon I'm going to say something completely politically incorrect, but it looks a bit hobo-ish.
Well, these are sort of these infiltrating, stealthy, sneaky guys.
Yeah. Do you know, and I'm, again, showing my age, but there's like a section of it. This is what it reminds me of. There's a section in the movie Robin Hood with...
where they've
Kevin
got
Costner, where he's going in as a beggar to try, and that's kind of what it reminds me of. It reminds me of him trying to infiltrate that way. And anyway, looking
like a commoner, a
because
beggar.
nobody sees homeless people.
Unfortunately, this is a 7.5 foot tall killing machine in power armor underneath that robe, so I suspect the level of...
Do you know what? I still reckon people wouldn't see them, but that's a different conversation for another day, and probably not for...
Yeah. We also get the Eliminators, which are the new snipers, sort of marksman-esque, in their robes and stuff, Primaris Marines with big fancy bolt guns. I'm assuming there's some sort of sniper rifle. There's nothing in the present rules that accounts for what these are, so it'd be interesting to see the rules for them. And they tie in, obviously, to our Vanguard Librarian as well, because they're in a very similar sort of... you can see the leg armor in particular matches. They've got the weird lower leg greaves.
Thinking about the capes.
The camo capes as well. And the fact that what I really love about these models is they've actually put the cape over the backpack.
Yeah.
So many models that you see have the capes under it and the backpack completely exposed, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a camo cloak. And then, put the backpack on top of it.
Yeah.
The interesting part about the artwork just before these previews is there's a miniature, or I say a miniature, there is a model in the top left that looks very much like a captain. He's got a robe on again. He's got a big bionic eye and sort of targeting arrays on his backpack, and he's got a very fancy-looking sniper-esque bolt gun. And I've said it to a couple of people, and I reckon this is Scout Sergeant Tellian. Mm-hmm. He's going to be Primarist, much like Calgar was, and I reckon that they're going to tie him into these Vanguard Space Marines as a new version of Tellian. I could be wrong. It's purely my supposition, but there's some remarkable similarities. If you Google Scout Sergeant Tellian and bring this image up alongside them, you'll see what I mean. But, right or wrong, I think that's where they could be going with it. Then we get the Chaos previews. Now, this first one in the Master of Possessions, we've actually seen a couple of times prior to this official image, and it wasn't until just now that you've told me what you think it looks like, and I now cannot unsee that. Okay,
so... this is actually one of my favourite models from the previews that we've got. And I like it for a number of reasons. And I've kind of got a whole nother conversation to potentially have about it. But it does, to to me, I guess he looks like he's skipping. So
Yeah.
he's juggling fire and skipping. And so for me, he actually looks like a fire dancer. And I think
Like
that's one of the reasons that I really like that model. But yeah, I can see that I'm not 100% sure that having a skipping man juggling fire is necessarily what's going to draw most players to this particular model.
Yeah, see, it wasn't until you said that when I looked at it, when it's like a leaping skip.
Yeah, he looks like he's that kind of thing, skipping along, playing with his fire.
It's, all the burning skulls and like ram's horns and all the rest of it.
That's okay. He's finding the lighter side of
it is an interesting pose now, and like I say, I can't unsee it now you've said it, which is a real problem, but it is a very cool model nonetheless, and it does follow a little bit of the trope that Games Workshop was famous for, particularly through its 3rd and through 4th editions, where it was flames and skulls, and this has a lot of both.
Yeah.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 around his feet. There's 1 around his neck. He's wearing one. Both of his backpack vents are. There's 3 on the top of the backpack. There's 1 on the staff. It looks like there's 1 in his hand that's on fire. Like he's got the skull motif going on. I reckon there's a big one on the back of him on his backpack as well. Even though we can't see it, I'm just assuming that's what'll happen.
A guess, yep.
We then get the new Chaos Space Marines. I know there's a lot of people hanging out for these to be resculpted so that they can actually buy current range Chaos Space Marine miniatures, because the ones that are out at the moment, I think, are from 3rd edition. They've been around a long, long time. They're looking their age, and they're small.
Really are. Yep.
These new ones are...
They look bigger, but that could just be because they've
Oh, no.
taken them closer up.
Well, those are 32mm bases, and if you look at the guy in the middle, he's got his feet on the edges of the bases.
And they're hanging over.
And he's now filling the base size. So they're definitely larger based on that alone. They look scary. They look really, really good. And they're different to the Blackstone ones. So it'd be interesting to see whether there are more variants than these 3. Hopefully the box set obviously gives us like 5 or 10, depending on what we get. But I really like them because they actually look like they're not just Space Marines with some horns.
So I really like them as well, but I just have issues with panel lining. And so I don't like that. The sculpt itself is awesome.
Then we get the new Plastic Obliterator, which I'm actually really torn on. I really like it and then really don't in the same breath.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that one, I'm going to be honest.
There's actually a second image
What's
of
that
him.
thing coming out of his shoulder?
Guns. So he's living flesh metal, and he can reshape his body to have guns.
Right.
There's a couple of interesting things about this. There is another version of it in the video, so the kit, there's obviously more than one of this particular model. I'm assuming we'll get a box of 3, like the Centurions. The feet and the leg armor is very reminiscent of the Dreadnought, Space Marine Dreadnought's toes, but it's also Centurion toes. And I'm kind of looking at this in the head's now inside and encased sort of in the middle of its body, which is, again, very Centurion-esque. And I can't help but think that they've gone to try and link the Centurion to it in some way, to try and give it a place where it's a natural
fit
evolution of the model.
Yeah.
It's got a big...
That's the thing I was talking about.
This here.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's got a giant plasma cannon. I forget the right name for it. It's actually got a proper name. It comes on a couple of the different Hell vehicles. What looks like a heavy bolter on the other side. Probably twin melter guns on one hand and then twin bolters on the other. Big power fists as well. Big broody thing. I actually really like the fact that all the skin's red and inflamed where the guns are coming out and where all the pipes and stuff join in. They've done a good job painting it. I think, though, that because it's on a white background and the base is quite light, and then you've got all this light skin, it actually looks brighter than it probably needs. I feel like it should be darker, like a bit more imposing and scary, whereas at the moment I don't know. The more I look at it, the more I go, it's cool, but I don't know. The last thing is we got a new demon engine called the Venom Crawler, which... I've seen people say they want to paint it up like a redback spider.
Yeah, I was going to say that's what it reminds me of.
Big bulbous tail end and spiky stabby things at the front. A couple of little guns mounted on the sides there as well. It doesn't really tell us anything what it does. It's just cool and scary looking. It's a big base as well. I reckon that's probably an 80 or 100 mil round, in which case this thing isn't.
That's huge.
It isn't little. So
that'd be what, 12 centimeters tall?
No, I reckon it's probably somewhere between 8 and 10.
If that's a 10...
It'd be somewhere between 8 and 10 centimeters tall, because that's roughly what the base is.
I'd say it's roughly the same size. Whatever size base it is, it's roughly the same height.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we've got no way of comparing what base that actually is, but at the moment, it's not going to be a little demon engine. It's got a little face on the side of it with a tongue coming out of it. Again, covered in spikes and tentacles.
How high are the bases normally?
Only a couple of mil. I've got
3 mil?
I've got a standard base here. It'd be 5 mil.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to go roughly.
I reckon that's an 80 or 100 mil round.
Yeah.
It could be an oval, actually, to be fair. We just, because of the angle, we can't tell. But it's a cool model nonetheless.
Yep.
We then come down to the Warhammer community section, where we've now obviously got the Warhammer 40,000 Voxcast podcast. Role models webcomics are now a thing. There's daily articles, and we've also got the big community survey coming as well. This isn't out yet. We'll obviously share it on our Facebook page when it does make itself available, so we can all have a voice in what happens. That's how we got Sisters of Battle with the last community one, which is great. We're also going to be seeing a Sisters of Battle bulletin every couple of weeks now with new models and sculpts. They've got their first preview on here. It's the return of Boob Armor.
Yeah.
Which is, I really appreciate them sticking to the style of the original Sisters of Battle, in that these models won't look out of place beside the ones I already own. The bolt gun's been updated because it's now a more modern style than the old second ed ones that I have. But her armor is very similar. There's a little bit less sort of bodice detail on her torso, like where the what do you call the thing that goes around your torso and you tighten it at the back, and it's really like it shapes a woman's figure. What do you call them?
Yep, I do know. Can't think. Corset.
Corset. Thank you. There's a lot less detail on the sort of that runs from the nape of the neck down to her midsection, where the original Sisters had like almost like a zip or this sort of detailing down the middle of them. But she's still got the inquisitorial eye on her belt on a rosary bead style thing. She's still got the I don't know what you call them, the robes around her upper arms. They're still wearing gloves rather than gauntlets. And all the knees and sort of the ankle armor all matches up. There's no high heels, which is great because that's not what the original range had either. But it does have boob plate.
Yep.
So I'm really excited. They look really good.
I'm assuming you mean the model, not just the boob plate.
Yes.
Just that I clarify that for other people who are thinking that you're admiring the boob plate.
No. Although the boob plate is something, because it's got a seam that runs straight down the middle of it that you end up highlighting, which just makes it interesting and draws a lot of attention there, because I've seen people paint the boobs separate colours instead of... So she ends up looking like she's wearing a bra on the outside.
But I think that's often how corsets work, and that similar kind of top, so I'd have no issue with that.
Yeah, there you go. All of mine are Order of the Bloody Rose, so it's just red power armor for me.
Yeah.
We then have something that I'll cover in just a second. I am going to show I'm going to talk about the new Primaris Lieutenant they previewed, which is one of my favourite videos that they previewed, because it came out and says, wouldn't be a reveal without a new Primaris Lieutenant, wouldn't it?
Because there's so few of them.
Yeah, I think 14 or 15 of them. There's a few. Or maybe it's not double digits yet, but I know it's it's either 9 or 10. It's pretty close.
You probably should have Googled that before you started.
No, because they're too hard to find, because they're in different box sets. You can't buy them all individually.
Anyway, moving on.
And the preview starts, and they, Master of War and this, that, and the other. And, it's, latest Primaris Lieutenant, and then Drachnian slides into the frame, the demon sword of Abaddon. And then the next shot is a dead Primaris Lieutenant on the base. And the music ramps up, and the War Master is coming 26 days from the release of the video, which makes it, what did we say?
6th American time, 7th of March Australian time.
So somewhere Wednesday, Thursday of the first real week in March.
Yeah.
Which is super exciting, because the previews they've got for this model make it look freaking huge.
So they'll probably go pre-release, you reckon, the first weekend of March?
I reckon if they show it that week, on the 6th or 7th, it'll go pre-order that weekend, so around the 10th.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll get the release the following week.
I thought they'd do it earlier.
Look, they might put it up for pre-release prior, but normally they give you kind of a week's notice to do it. And I reckon this is a model that they're going to be hard pressed to keep up with, because this model hasn't been updated since 2nd edition. He's seriously needed an update for the last 3 editions of the game, and it's really exciting to see a new version of it, because it looks enormous. It'll be on at least a 50mm base from the look of it, because it's got half a Primaris Lieutenant lying on it for starters. Big claw, big sword, big top knot, which I know is polarizing for a lot of people. but it's a batten, and he's always had a top knot. So I'm very excited to see that model complete, because all we get is we get a shot of the tip of the sword, then we get a shot of the claw, then we get a shot of one foot, then we get a shot of the back of the hand holding Drachnian, but we never actually see the full miniature.
Yeah.
And I've seen people put together a composite trying to fill in the gaps
Bits
with
of-
lines and
yeah.
stuff, trying to get a rough idea of what the model's going to look like. But I
Some
don't.
people have so much time on their hands.
Oh, if I can find the picture, I'll put it in the show notes. It's really cool, but it's like someone showed it to me and I said, "You realise the hand's back to front there? Like you've got the back of the hand showing at the front,
Yeah.
because of the way that they've had to
Yeah.
they've had to do it." But it's going to be an impressive model. It's definitely looking like something that more than just Chaos players are going to want to buy.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing, which is a bit of self-indulgence, so you'll have to bear with us, is the Warhammer Heroes were announced.
Bear with us. I'm not self-indulgent. You are. You started this.
Well, tough. I'm being self-indulgent. I've just apologised for it. We're moving on. So the winners for 2019 for announced. So we've got Sean Pittman, Dan Gomez, Chuck T. Moore, Carl Tuttle, Mike Brandt, Mark Rayleigh, Hank Edley, Jeremy, I can't even say Jeremy's surname. Srofe?
I'd say Sroft, but anyway.
Ben Curry, Andrew Weller, Damien O'Byrne, Gail Price, Daniel Street, who is in New Zealand.
He's the New Zealander, yep.
And then Emma and I.
Yay!
We are, time of recording, we are the only Aussies to have been awarded this, and certainly the only West Australians. So,
Well, the only Australians, so that does make us the only
Yeah.
West Australians, yeah.
so we are very flattered and
Excited.
yeah, it's
Happy. Proud.
it's really, really cool. And Emma did a post up about it, and we've said some stuff on the Facebook page as well and thanked everyone. There are a lot of people behind us who give us these opportunities and support us in these endeavours, and they're ones who go unspoken a lot of the time. So feel free to go and read the posts and some of the comments and stuff, because we really appreciate everyone's support for everything we do.
But I
And-
guess we're really excited that it has been, obviously we're really grateful for the people who nominated us, and we know that that was more than a few people who did that, and thank you so much. I think we're really proud to have Australia on there.
I know that obviously between us and Daniel in New Zealand, we're the first ones outside of the continental US and Europe.
Yeah.
Most of these names so far are either United States or the UK specifically, and there's a couple outside of the UK as well.
And just to clarify, so on the website, it says with more winners to be announced, and that's because we got the email letting us know. I think it was
24 hours.
24 hours prior to
These announcements.
the announcements, and we had to officially accept the award, and
allow them to publish our name and blah, blah, blah.
But what I mean is that we had a very short window to actually
Yeah.
accept that award for them to be able to announce it. So I think that's why it still says with more to be announced. But yeah, we know that there were tens of thousands of people nominated, and I believe less than 20 winners selected.
Yeah.
So
Well, last
it's
year
pretty
was
awesome for us to have two from Australia or two living in this house, really.
Yeah. Last year it was 12,000 nominations and 18 awards.
That's right, yes.
So, yeah, we're very proud to be part of that. And they've sent us a little email saying that there's, the awards pack is, I think there's a medal and a T-shirt and some other goodie stuff that we get.
Mhm.
Obviously, our name on the wall at Warhammer World,
Mm-hmm.
which I'll have to send someone in to go and get a photo of once they put the plaque up.
Yeah.
And then as we find out anything more and we get that stuff, we'll make sure we share photos and stuff, because it's all kind of cool to share with the community.
Yeah.
You'll probably hear it. Well, I know we're speaking to Carl, who's another winner on here on the Independent Characters podcast,
Mm-hmm.
very shortly, and we've got a couple of other casts asking for us to go and talk to them as well, which is exciting. So as soon as we know where we're going to be on what things, you can go and listen to us ramble more.
Yay, because you don't hear us jumble on enough.
Exactly. So that's kind of the LVO wrap up that's gone on. Obviously, we've had.
Can I hijack for a little bit?
Yeah, go for it.
So I was part of a podcast
Oh, yes.
recording last week. Was it last weekend? The weekend before last? Anyway, recently. And one of the things that came up was similar to what we talked about on the last podcast with the Magus model and
Oh, yes.
remind me what she's called, the Eastern European pirate.
Severina Rain.
Oh, perfect.
Eastern
You know,
European pirate.
And she will always be
Jesus
the
Christ.
Eastern European pirate to me. And so they were kind of going, oh, you must really love those because we have new female characters. I'm just wondering, are there any women who are part of the character development team?
What do you mean? Like the sculptors?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess.
Well, obviously,
Or
Severina's book is written by
a woman.
a woman.
Yeah. I guess what it feels like is that they're kind of gone, you know, we've worked out that there's a whole population in the market that we haven't tapped into. So we'll just chuck a couple of female models out there and hopefully that'll satisfy them and get them in. I'm not sure whether or not that's something that they have kind of done, but that's the response that I'm getting from having different men talking to me about it. Oh, you must really love this character because she's a woman. And yet out of the models that we saw from the LVO preview, I most liked the Master of Possessions.
Yeah.
Which obviously isn't feminine in any way, shape or form, apart from the fact that he's skipping or fire dancing and juggling balls of fire. But I just thought it was interesting that kind of this idea that, oh, well, you're female, so you must want more female models. I'm kind of thinking like, for other female gamers, they're not necessarily playing with the female characters either.
Yeah, and that's sort of always been a conversation point for any of these hobbies where people get involved and say, we need more representation. The question has to be, are those people wanting more representation, or are they happy with what they've got at the moment because they enjoy it for what it is, not what they think it should be?
Well, there's and I guess that's kind of what I'm asking. Is it females saying we need more female representation, or is it men going, if we give them more female representation, that'll keep them happy?
Yeah, is it being done to meet a political agenda, or is it being done because they
Who's
actually
driving
want...
it?
Yeah. And I mean, we saw recently, it was somewhere in the last 18 months, where Peter tried to get Games Workshop to stop sculpting fur onto miniatures because it...
I don't think that was actually real.
Oh, no, it was.
No, I don't think it was. I honestly think that's just... I often see things and I think, do you actually believe that, or are you just trying to get publicity?
Yeah, and
does
that's
Peter
obviously...
actually believe that having sculpted models with fur on them
promotes animal cruelty?
Or are they just trying to raise awareness for animal cruelty and they'll do it in whatever way they can?
And by doing that, they rile up all the gamers to...
Well, that's it. How many times was it shared?
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of times they got that shared. That's hundreds of thousands of people who saw their message who wouldn't necessarily.
No. It's also hundreds of thousands of people who thought they were frickin' idiots.
Yes, the gamers did, but all of those gamers were sharing it. And how many people who don't care about this game saw it?
Yeah, okay.
And so they're getting their message out there and other people are doing the work for them.
That's true. I mean, social media is the thing to use now to get your message out there because it's organic and it grows and goes viral.
Well, we were having a conversation about this, obviously not recorded, and I am going to be honest, I can't actually remember what the conversation was about, but it was about another podcast where they'd got, was it a podcast or a blog post, and they'd gone out and just absolutely slammed something, and it was so against what so many people believed, and so in response to that, they're all sharing it, going, this guy's an idiot. Now that post or blog post or podcast, whatever it was, that just... it went viral.
Yeah, because people wanted to go and listen to see what he had to say and why.
Yeah. And I think if you see something that you don't agree with, don't share it.
Yeah.
I've totally gone off topic.
Anyway, you were on it was a podcast called As a Man, and it's with Mike and Piers, not me.
Yes, different
Mike.
Mike.
Different Mike.
It's called Mike and Piers. It's not called Mike and Piers, not me.
Yep.
Yeah.
So... I asked him a bit about it as well before you went, so we could talk about it now. His work in progress mission statement is to inspire men to make better informed choices about themselves and who they are, which we aim to do through talking about the male perspective from the position of equality. And it's primarily a gaming podcast. Well, he's told me it is.
Well, it's interesting because the whole way through it, we're having conversation. He's going, now for people who aren't gamers, this is what this means. And so I found it quite interesting because we get in this conversation. Oh, let me just tell you what that means. Let me just tell you what that means.
He works in mental health as well, and obviously he's trying to give perspectives and opportunities for people to understand
just
that.
Open conversation.
Yeah. So, As soon as we can get a link to where those podcasts are going to be, because I think they're trying to get a few episodes up their sleeve before they publish the first one, we'll share that so you can find Emma on one of the first couple of episodes. I'm assuming it'll be 2 or 3 by the time they do a couple of intro ones.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But that kind of covers all of the news that we've got at the moment. It's been a very long
in
opener.
answer to that, you don't know whether or not they have any females who are part of that process, or if it
we definitely saw women at the design studio while we were at Warhammer World, but what roles they had taken within the business, I have no idea. I know that there have been female names show up for sculptors and designers in the novels and in the books. What exactly they do within the company, I can't say. But there's definitely an equal opportunity availability there, where if you've got the talent and the skills, they're hiring the right people. Or certainly that's what it looks like to me. Anyway, this intro has gone way over time. It's going to be a long episode.
45 minutes for an intro. Oh, dear.
Yeah.
15 minutes to cover my 12 pages of notes.
No, that's not going to happen. We'll be back for the second half of this long conversation in just a minute. The day of Ascension is at hand. We're talking Genestealer cults, specifically for Warhammer 40,000. However, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about is around primarily around deployment and some of the tricks that the Genestealer cult are going to bring to the table that players of Warhammer 40,000, particularly in a competitive setting, might actually have to seriously think about when they're going to major tournaments, because it plays, and I say all this purely theoretical. I haven't had a chance to play the game with them yet.
I think you've played a few games in your head.
I have, and I have played the army prior to this codex with a reasonable degree of success, but I was only sort of slowly getting into it when the index dropped, and I played.
Didn't like it.
No, the index was a bit underwhelming.
Yeah.
So
before we get started on this, though, I do have in my notes that we were supposed to talk about your top 3 favourite updates in the intro. Did you still want to do that now?
No, we're gonna do it very quickly now. So
Okay.
this book has a lot of really cool new stuff in it. We got a whole bunch of new models in the Adelan Jackals bikers. The motocross bikes look really cool. I don't know if you've seen these yet. I've got the codex right here, so I'm going to pick the book up and show Emma very quickly that there's now motocross in Warhammer 40,000.
Perfect. Of course there is.
Which I really, really love. And the new character models are amazing as well. So I don't know what page, because there's no page number on this, but there are my motocross riders down here doing wheelies and...
I like that he's...
with the crowbar?
Yeah.
So there's he's carrying an improvised weapon, and he's bright yellow on a bright yellow bike.
Yeah. I'm less impressed with the bright yellow, but I did like the crowbar.
I really love the fact that we did get new models with this book, which is great, and the fact that the book encourages you to stay with Genestealer cults rather than mishmashing it in with Astra Militarum or with Tyranids, although you can do it. It really does encourage you to stick with one.
And this has obviously got the new Magus model as well.
Yep, so we spoke about that last time.
Yeah.
The new Magus standalone miniature.
So I was going to say, she's a standalone, whereas if you want to get the previous Magus model, you can still get that in the 5-pack?
It's a 3-pack, so 3-character pack called the Brood Coven. Okay. So it's a Patriarch, a Primus, and a Magus, and you get a couple of Familiars as well. So I suppose technically it's 5 miniatures.
See, there you go. I'm on it.
3 favourite things, though. Miniature-wise, the Nexus is amazing. He's stood with a hollow table. He's actually a model we're going to talk about in a minute anyway.
One of our characters that we're going to chat about.
The little hidden Easter egg, there's the 3D hollow image is actually Games Workshop's Nottingham site.
Oh, wow.
It's the car park and the warehouse and the manufacturing and everything.
Yep.
So it's a cool little Easter egg to have in there that they're planning to invade Games Workshop Nottingham. I really love that. The Jackal Alphys, I really, really dig. She's on a bike with a sniper rifle. Mm-hmm. Really lovely sculpt, lots of personality. Really, really detailed. I really love that miniature. The third one is the Kellamorph, which has been a big fan of everyone's when they've seen it. He just needs a big cowboy hat for his gunslinging positioning with his 3 arms and pistols. His rules as well are absolutely amazing for the army.
I quite like the Locust.
The big man in the hood and the crossed arms with the big swords.
With the big swords, yeah.
Most of these models, from what I understand...
And I do... Oh, I can't pronounce that, but I do love those.
Oh, the biophagus with the alchemical familiar. The familiar's amazing.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I know plenty of people will buy that just for that familiar.
Yeah.
The Kellamorph is only available at time of recording in the Kill Team box. He's not a standalone at the moment. The Sanctus, the biophagus, the Jackal, the Magus, the Nexus, and the Clamvus, as far as I'm aware, will all be available individually, and the new Aberrants and the new Abominants also, they're on pre-order right now, but by the time you hear this... Oh no, they'll still be on pre-order the first time you hear this. So we got a whole bunch of new character models. We got the new bikes. We got the new Ridge Runner, which is probably one of my disappointments, because it's a great-looking model, and then the rules just don't line up for it, so I don't think you're going to see too many of them on the table. Favourite three things, though, is the expanded cults. We got proper expanded cults with very different rules, and every one of them looks good. I've got 3 that I really like, so I'm going to have to try and narrow that down for the colour scheme. I really like the fact that... my second favourite thing is the fact that it is completely viable standalone. I always like running them standalone if I can. Almost
from everything that we've talked about and discussed, almost seems like it really works better as a standalone than... it's got strengths in running it as a standalone. I won't say it works better, but I'd say that there's some certain strengths in that.
I think you'll see players still mishmash it, but I definitely think that if you build around it sensibly, you can run it standalone perfectly viably. And I think the third thing I really like is the fact that they've gone out of their way to give us really varied opportunities to go down that deployment manipulation role. Like, they haven't just put it in as an ambush rule and then left it at that. They've given us... Like, so far, we've got 8 different things that change it and modify it, which is really exciting because it shows that they've put a lot of thought and care into writing this book to give us something that is unique to this army. The only disappointment I really have so far, and I'm sure people out there listening will probably go, oh, he's going to complain about the Gene Stealers in the book now. No, I'm not. My biggest complaint of this book is it shows what they could have done with other books and didn't. And I'm going to be really sulky now and get on my pointy-eared soapbox and complain about my Harlequin Codex. Because the Harlequin Codex...
Make it a really short soapbox, because we've only got how many minutes?
The Harlequin Codex, the update from the 6th edition, 7th edition Codex through to the 8th edition, we got nothing. The models didn't change. We got updated rules. We got the masks and the stratagems and all the rest of it, but it was literally a book release. And there's been plenty of other armies that have had to deal with the same thing, but most armies have had something. And the Gene Stealer cult were kind of in the same spot, where apart from the Abominants, Aberrants and the Abominant, and at the time it was just the Aberrants, everything was available for sale, and they could easily have just gone, nah, bugger it, we're just going to give you exactly what you had available, and with a new book and codex, and here you go. And they didn't. They gave you... like 6 or 7 new character models. They gave us the new vehicle. They gave us bikes. They gave us the quad bikes. And then they gave us a whole bunch of new stratagems and everything else that like they gave the Harlequins. And it makes me sit there going, you rushed the Harlequin release when you could have given us a new unit and a couple of new characters, expanded that army out, and then you did it for the Gene Stealer cult and you showed how good the Harlequin one could have been had there been a push to do that internally. So... that's probably my biggest complaint about this book, is it shows what could have been if there'd been a drive to do it.
Coulda, shoulda, woulda, didn't. So we're talking about the Gene Stealer cult.
Yep.
And let's just first go over our assumptions with this conversation.
Sure.
So the basic assumption is that this is talking about Gene Stealer cult as a standalone.
Yep.
And also we're talking about how it works in matched play.
Yes. Matched organised play, to be specific, because it includes rules of 3 and... the limits on how many characters you can have and so on.
Okay. So, what have I got written down here? All right, yeah. So I think part of the reasons that we're talking about it as a standalone is because obviously you can give away some of your game plan if you're not using it as a standalone.
Yeah, so the without stepping too much into the mechanic, because we're going to talk about that in a second, the mechanic only functions, the rule is called Cult Ambush, and it only functions essentially within the codex itself, because all the units have the rule Cult Ambush, which essentially is a form of hidden deployment. And by including stuff outside of the codex, like Tyranids, which will be your main thing that you'll see added to this army, you remove a lot of the utility of Cult Ambush. I think what you're more likely to see is a big Tyranid army with a small contingent of Genestealer cults focusing on the characters, getting psychics, getting snipers, and those sorts of things, where cult ambush is not the reason you're taking them. You're taking them to support parts of a Tyranid army, not the other way around.
Okay, so in particular for this episode, we're talking about ambush and subterranean assault, deep strike.
Yes, so cult ambush is the rule, and that includes the ambush and subterranean assault, aka deep strike, as its two sub-facets.
Okay, and so up to half the points can be used for deep strike in match play.
Yeah, so the FAQ updated that it was power level and they changed it to points. So up to 50% of your points can be used to put your models in tactical reserves, which is what subterranean assault is. Most people colloquially just call it deep strike these days because it was known as that for so long in previous editions. So, 2,000 point game, 1,000 points off the table, ready for a subterranean assault. But there are ways around that with this codex. There are some really interesting ways around all of these sorts of limits. The codex kind of says, these are the rules, and here's the cheat codes on how to bend them.
That's it. So it's a really strategic army.
Absolutely.
Particularly for the deployment, I guess.
Yeah, the games are going to be won in the opening turn or two if you can get the deployment right, and then it'll come down to how well you've done that as to how the game plays out.
What seems to be quite different... Hey, I was leaning on that. What seems to be quite different for this codex compared to some of the others is that I've heard over and over again that games are won and lost in the first turn with who goes first.
Yeah.
And this seems to be completely the opposite. You almost want to go second.
Yeah,
with the Genestealer cult.
I think if you're canny with it and you utilise the tools that they've given you for these stratagems and different characters, there's every reason to want to go second, let your opponent come out and do whatever they feel like doing, minimise what your losses you do have, and then strike back.
Yep.
It'll also help for progressive scoring games where holding the objectives at the end of the turn is more important than holding them at the start. So the army really works well in that regard by being able to respond in the early parts of the game and then force your opponent into a reactive state towards the mid-game, because you can then start controlling the table and they have to respond to you. It's going to be one that your initial turn is almost always reactive, but by applying it right, you flip the table almost instantly.
Okay, so if we look at the deploy rule for subterranean assault or deep strike, that's used in turns 2 and 3.
Yep. So you used to be able to do it turn 1. It's only turns 2 and 3. Anything not deployed by the end of turn 3 from tactical reserves is automatically destroyed. It should be pointed out that if you use one of the stratagems, Return to the Shadows, which lets you go back into tactical reserve, you can do that after turn 3. It doesn't automatically kill you if you do so, because you've already been deployed. That rule only works the first time you put on the table. Things like Eldar Swooping Hawks or the Tyranid Morlock have ways of leaving the table later in the game and returning again and again. This is the same. So as long as you're deployed by turn 3 the first time, you can then yo-yo essentially on and off.
Yeah. Okay, so do you want to talk about the deploy rule?
Yeah, so subterranean assault is very, very basically the same as 99% of the other deep strike-esque reserve deployments, whether it's teleport drop or deep strike through jump packs or whatever it is. It's must be more than 9 inches away from an enemy model. And this follows that exact same rule. So, you're deploying models.
You can, but it's only infantry and bikes.
Yes, so it doesn't apply to their vehicles. So you can do it with up to, I think the quad bike is the biggest thing you can do it with. You can't do it with Leman Russes and Sentinels. You can't do it with the Rock Grinders or any of the dedicated transport. So it is only infantry. Unlike most armies, though, this is up to squads of 20 models, which can be good and bad, because sometimes you want to have that nice little space for 4 or 5 dudes to deploy, and I've only got units of 20, so they can't go there. But I think that the wall of claws that you deploy at 9 inches, because at that point you've got a 2d6 charge in your assault, your charge phase, and there are ways of getting that down to 7 inches purely by adding buffs from different cults. You get +1, I think it is, from the Icon Ward, and if you take the Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, you get another +1. So if you ambush the character plus that unit, and the unit starts within, I think it's 6 of the banner, then, and they're Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, you need a 7 on 2 dice, which is the average result on 2 dice. So you can reliably, at 9 inches, not be worried about flamers, which only have an 8-inch Overwatch range in general, and then get a charge off with 20 guys that pump out 60 plus attacks with relative impunity. So the Genestealer Cult may not be getting turn 1 charges, but it's going to be overwhelming turn 2 charges.
Yeah, and I guess what we talked about was that it gives infantry board control that it traditionally wouldn't normally be able to do, and certainly not this rapidly.
Well, like I mentioned a couple of the others earlier, the Morlocks are single model, albeit on a decent-sized base. The Swooping Hawks are on 25 more bases, and they go in squads of 5 to 10, but seeing more than 6 is pretty rare. Most of those rapid-moving units come in squads that max out at 10 or 12 models, and are typically taken in lower numbers, ignoring Alex Harrison's LVO list of 2 units of 9 scatterbikes. But most of the units that Deep Strike don't come in the quantities and the numbers that this army does, let alone in the volumes of units that it does. So seeing 60, 80, 100 models deploying via Subterranean Assault turn 2 isn't going to be out of the ordinary necessarily, because as long as you're willing to paint that many models, you're going to be able to you're actually going to be able to do it, which means that you can deploy in such a way that you have control over half or more of the table come turn 2, where you're threatening something from somewhere, and your opponent's not going to be able to bring their force to bear because you're not stood in front of them directly. You're going to be spread here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. So it's going to give you really impressive board presence and board control to force them where you want them to move.
Yeah, and I think that with what you're saying, you can be here, there, and everywhere. From as little as just 35 points, units can deploy anywhere, which means they're able to claim or contest objectives, claim line breaker, they can draw fire, they can really disrupt the opponent and the opponent's game plan.
Yeah, I mean, 35 points buys you 5 Genestealer Acolytes, and they're basically baby Genestealers in the combat phase, so you can't afford to just ignore them. You do have to deal with them. And admittedly, they're not that hard to kill. But if you're going second and you need to contest or control objectives, they're troops. Yeah. They're plentiful. And dropping them on the table in turn 2 or even holding them till turn 3 is a completely viable solution for those dirt cheap units that you get to turn 3 and go, okay, cool, I'm going to deploy them all the way over here, outside of line of sight, outside of everything. There's only 5 guys. They don't have to worry about them. And then a turn later, they wander into your opponent's deployment zone for line breaker in turn 5. There's those little cheap units, 35 points for Acolytes, 50 points for 10 Neophytes. If you're actually doing that sort of dropping unit where you are just using them in that capacity, you might even better off be spending those extra 15 points for the extra 5 wounds and for the extra ranged weapons where you're not deploying them at 9 inches to charge, you're deploying them in spots that they're 20 inches away from the nearest enemy and they actually require effort to get rid of. So there's definitely... this army will be 2 battalions or 3 battalions in most builds because you...
And that gives them the extra CP as well.
Yeah, and because you don't care about going first, if you're using the 2017 deployment rules where if you finish deploying first, you get +1 to the roll to go first, the Genestealer Cult doesn't care about that. It doesn't necessarily want to be going first to begin with. So the ability to go, oh, okay, we're playing a 2,000 point game. I've got 1,000 points. Well, 10... Neophytes is 50 points, so 20 of them is 100 points. So I can put 200 of them in units of 10 into reserve, and then turn 2, I can drop 200 models 9 inches away from you.
Yeah, you're right. Someone's got to paint those 200 models.
That's the limit for this army, is the amount of resources required. Much like any of the big spam armies, like a big Orc Horde or the Dark Eldar boat fleets. The boat fleets are... dollar-wise as expensive as doing a Horde army, but obviously there's less models to paint. Whereas you do a Tyranid swarm or you do this army in a swarm, you're paying $70 for 10 models that are worth 50 points. It's some big money and some big time, which I think will be what stops these really like I've just described, putting 200 models down. That'll be what limits it.
So we touched on it briefly, but one of the complaints is that this can only be used on turn 2 and 3, whereas it used to be able to be used turn 1. But you actually think that that's a positive because players can use screenings now. So it gives you an opportunity on turn 1 to create openings.
So obviously screens are a fact of life to stop first turn charges, and the Genestealer Cult are no different to that. So in the past, when you rolled on the Cold Ambush chart, you rolled a dice or multiple dice depending on how you were actually ambushing, and you might get a result that let you move again after you deployed, but you still can't come within an inch of an enemy model. So a well-screened enemy, if you drop those Gene Stealers turn 1, yep, you get to kill all the Gene Stealers kill the screen, and then you're stood in front of the enemy army for their turn 2. At which point your 15-point Gene Stealers are just dying by the handfuls, particularly if there's flamers or anything else really anti-infantry up close. By letting this happen turn 2, it gives the Gene Stealer player a chance to utilise the Cult Ambush side of it with the blip tokens, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yes, that's next up.
To really weigh down a flank and then force an assault at a specific point in the enemy line, open the screen, and then turn 2...
Sneak on through.
Yeah, basically use all your Cult Ambush subterranean assaults and pile on through the gap.
Yeah.
So it's definitely it's trying to use a sledgehammer on a very specific point in the enemy line and break that part open. You don't want to engage front on because you'll just lose, because one-on-one they're average. They're essentially guardsmen. So you want to use the deployment options you have to really... I mean, the refuse flank is the natural one to use in this particular army's case, but you're basically trying to bring as much force to bear on a single point, and this army does it better than most.
So, as we said before, it's a really strategic army, and that can force the opponent to be reactive rather than proactive.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the ways that they do that really well is because of ambush.
Yeah, so on the topic, just before we get stuck into ambush, I think deployment is too flippantly ignored by a lot of players, simply looking for cover or looking for...
I'm not sure that it's flippantly ignored. I think perhaps it might be...
Not given the amount of thought it deserves?
Perhaps it's... people don't understand the importance that deployment can make in the future turns.
Yeah, okay.
That sounds polite.
Look, and I'm just as guilty of it depending on the game I'm playing. Actually thinking out where your army's going to be a turn, 2 turns, 3 turns from now, and how you're going to score the objectives and then deploying accordingly is often way more important than making sure you're getting cover saves for turn 1, or you find yourself out of position turn 3 because you physically can't get line breaker, or you can't get to that objective because now you can't move far enough. The Gene Stealer Cult's ambush really lets you... It's forgiving in that regard, where you can manipulate itself at the introductory points of the game, but it also gives you an unprecedented level of control in the early parts of the game. And, in any game system, the movement phase is often stated as the most important phase in the game, because after that, you've got no control. It's all down to dice. Deployment actually is a big factor in your initial turn or 2 turns of movement. And I think it's sort of a flow-through effect where deploying well to maximize your chances in the mid-game is often more important than keeping an extra unit alive in cover.
Yeah.
So, ambush.
Ambush. Okay, so ambush basically means that instead of placing models on the table when you deploy, you place blip tokens.
Yes.
And that's equal to the number of units that you're deploying on the table that aren't under subterranean assault.
And with the codex, they actually give you, how many is it? 6,
cool.
12, 14, 28 blip tokens, double-sided. You actually get this with the codex. They also give you a 9-inch ruler. I don't actually know if it actually is 9 inches, though, and to be honest, I haven't really trusted these.
Let's trust them.
Yeah, well, let's assume it is.
Yeah, and if not, guess what? Everyone's got a tape measure.
So that's obviously to make sure that you're not within 9 when you use subterranean assault. Yeah. And it's cool because it's got at 9 inches, it's got the spores raining down from the Tyranids, and at 1, it's got the hive.
Yeah.
And then the blip tokens are these little red sort of minesweepery Auspex scan. If you've seen the Aliens movies, that's kind of...
I haven't.
No, I know you haven't. Philistine.
So, the number of blips is equal to the number of units that you're deploying, except that stratagems can be used and that can affect the number of tokens.
Yes.
Which effectively means that you have more tokens on the table than you do units, so your opponent actually has no idea what you're putting where.
Yes.
Or if you're putting something there.
Yeah.
It's like misdirection.
So I think we worked it out. You can have... in theory, you can have up to 6 extra tokens. 1 from, was it sweeper? Scanner
decoys.
Scanner decoys for 1 command point lets you have 3 extra tokens.
Yep.
And the other one, which is, what was it called?
So the stratagems that we're going to talk about
Uprising
is
something. Starts with an M.
meticulous
I
uprising.
think it's meticulous uprising is the
So
other
we're
stratagem.
talking about they came from below. This will be in a minute. They came from below: meticulous uprising, scanner decoys, a perfect ambush, return to the shadows, and lying in wait.
Yeah, so the scanner decoys is the one that I think every Genestealer Cult player should be using if they're going to utilize the ambush rules, where basically when you set that unit up, instead of placing one token, you place 4, so it's essentially 3 extra ones. But it is done at the time you place a single token.
Mm-hmm.
So what you can actually do is put down half a dozen tokens of single units first, and then halfway through the deployment go, I'm going to spend 1 command point for this deployment, and here's 4 instead.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting way of just messing with the table. So that's your first way of adding extra stuff straight away. The second way, which I really like, is my other favourite one, is called Meticulous Uprising.
Mm-hmm.
You use it before you reveal an ambush, which we'll talk about revealing them in a second. But it you move up to 3 inches of your up to 3 of your ambush tokens 12 inches each.
Yeah.
But it doesn't require you to reveal all 3 of them. You just have to still reveal that
one.
first
Yeah.
one, and then you can still reveal them in the right order. There was another one though called oh god, what was it? It wasn't Perfect Ambush. They came from below. Yeah, it's another 1 CP one, and it should be pointed out these are all dirt cheap. There's only one that's really expensive.
Oh no, perfect ambush is 3 and lying in wait is 2. The rest of them are all 1.
They came from below basically lets you, before revealing an ambush marker, select 3 units from your army that are in ambush, and then you can put them into subterranean assault. Which basically means that you essentially get 3 decoy tokens at that stage.
Yeah.
So, again, if you're planning well, you'll have 3 units that are infantry or bike that you will deploy on the table, knowing that you're going to spend 1 command point in turn 1 to simply make 3 more tokens, essentially decoys.
Yeah.
So between those 2 stratagems of 3 decoys plus, in theory, 3 more decoys, plus the opportunity to move 3 more tokens before you reveal them, it's cost you 3 command points, but you can completely change the face of the table. Where, like I said earlier, you can overload one flank by simply going, okay, cool, those 3 are fakes, those 3 are going in reserve, and those 3 are moving 12 inches to the midboard rather than the left-hand or the right-hand flank.
And yeah, as you said, that's using 3
command points.
3 command points. But it's relatively easy to get a minimum of at least 13 command points when you're building this army.
Any army in matched play not running at least a double battalion, I'll be really surprised at, because of the limits that you've got on characters. All the characters can only be taken once per detachment. And in a typical match play game, you only get 3 detachments. And there's the reason that limit, I think, is there is because some of those characters you want. Like, if I could field half a dozen Kelemorphs, I would, because they're that good. So by turning around and saying, no, you can only have each character once per detachment, stops the spamming of those really hyper-efficient characters. But in doing so, you go, cool, I want 3 Kelemorphs. Okay, I need 3 detachments. How do I build detachments? Oh, okay, well, I can run 3 35-point units of Acolytes for my 3 troops choices. Put the Kelemorph in, I think he's about 70-ish points, 80-ish points. And then I need 2 HQs. And the cheapest I can do that with is about 130-ish points, 120, 130-ish points. So it's cost me, 300 points for a battalion at that stage? If I'm playing a 2,000-point tournament, I can run that 3 times. And at that point, I've got 18 command points, and I've still got over 1,000 points to spend on the army. Yeah. So I think most of these Genestealer Cult armies should be running double battalion plus something else. Interesting that I think a brigade's the way to do it. Because the brigade will give you more command points, but it also has more requirements to fill. So if you come to a point where you can naturally fill a brigade, then I'd do it. But I wouldn't go out of my way to build a brigade just to try and get command points. I think that you lose the efficiencies there because you get models you don't necessarily use. Okay,
so to kind of cover some of those things again, decoy deployment via blips and adding scanner decoys, that's a 1 point cost.
Yeah, that's the 1 point command for scanner decoys.
Yep. So the opponent doesn't know where your deploying, obviously.
Yeah, the blind deployment is a real head mess for players because obviously it lets you completely counter deploy as long as you're careful with where you're placing those blips. I can see players just chucking the blips down going,
Yeah.
If you're careful, because when you deploy the blips, when you reveal them, and how you reveal them we'll talk about in a second, but when you reveal them, you place the first model from the unit within 1 inch of the blip. Or is it 3 inches of the blip? I'm going to have to look this up while I've got the book here now.
Okay, well, while we're talking about that...
every other model has to be within 6 inches of the first model, and it can't leave your deployment zone. So it's actually within 1 inch of the marker. It's not wholly within one, it's just within one. So you do get a bit of room there for the base sizes and whatnot.
Yeah.
And the rest of the units must be wholly within 6 inches of the first model and wholly within your deployment zone, and more than 9 inches from enemy models. Any models that cannot be placed are destroyed. But because enemies can't move within 9 of a blip, it means that you'll always, in theory, be able to deploy unless you put that blip on the back edge of the board or something weird's happened.
Or you put them too close together.
Yeah.
But it's quite a manipulative way to deploy, because it means that your opponent has to think about what they can't see. And it also means that if they go first, then they have to make a full movement phase without knowing what they're moving around.
Yeah, they could be moving towards scanner decoys where there's literally nothing there. They could end up, moving the wrong unit type up close to something that is significantly unpleasant for them to be near. They can move, because you can move the blips as well using the Nexus or using meticulous? Yeah, meticulous uprising. They could end up moving a unit that is 24-inch range weapons, and then all of a sudden, when you do reveal those blips, they're either out of range or they've just moved away so that you can't target to begin with.
Yeah.
I can see a lot of players, because of these factors, trying to hunker down and just going, you know what, I'm just not going to engage. The problem with doing that is you're then completely giving up any board control you might try and secure in turn one, because now the Genestealer cult goes, cool, we can deploy how we like, where we like, and you now have to respond to our uprising and our subterranean assaults rather than simply limiting where we can deploy.
And instead, so this, I guess, helps stop Alpha Strike armies.
Yeah. And
I guess because you can't come within those 9 inches of a blip, it really limits those first turn charges.
So there are a couple of ways around it, because when the blips are revealed, they're either revealed at the start of if you go first as a Genestealer cult player, you have to reveal your blips at the start of your first turn. Yep. Now, that doesn't stop you playing things like Meticulous Uprising and the Nexus and all that to try and get movement of blips, but it's done at the start of your movement phase. If your opponent goes first, you deploy and reveal your blips at the end of their movement phase. So they do get a chance to psychic and shoot and charge, but you don't have to tell them where anything is until they've finished all their movement, which is really important. So, like I said, you can put units in that are either dummy units or, you can sucker them out by screening with the blips, essentially. You can put your decoy blips out to stop first turn charges simply by having 3 blips 14, 15 inches apart to be safe, and nothing within 4 inches of them, and your opponent literally can't charge you turn one, in theory. But if you go, there's a couple of things like Warp Time, Twilight Pathways for the Harlequins. I don't 100% know when the Swarm Lord's ability to move again happens, whether that's the movement phase or the shooting phase, but there are a couple of powers that lurk around in some of the armies that let you move again after the movement phase, and they're obviously the ones that will get you around some of the blip screening that you can do with them. It's something that you probably just have to take into account if someone tells you they're running Chaos Space Marines or they're running the Swarm Lord, just making sure you're familiar with some of the extra ways you can move outside of the movement phase. The Eldar have got a few little sneaky ones like Fire and Fade, where you get to move 7 inches after shooting. That can be used to great effect. But yeah, I think by and large, you can really easily screen most assault armies just by stringing the blips out and then either moving them after the fact or revealing them to be nothing.
Yeah. Would you like to talk about revealing them now, or did you already cover that?
I've just covered that.
Okay, right. I thought you did, but then you said we'll get back to it and then proceeded to talk about it. So I was like, was there more you wanted to say or did you cover all of that? Okay, would you like to talk about the characters now?
Yeah, I love some of these Genestealer Cult characters. The Nexus I can see going into every army.
So that's an elite choice?
Yes, he's, from memory, he's about 40 points. He's not particularly expensive. He's the one who's got the scanner table that's scanning those rituals. Yeah. So he has a couple of really unique, cool rules that I just think, for his price, I'm just going to have a quick look and see what his price is. The Nexus is 50 points without war gear.
How much is the Sanctum while you've got it open?
Oh, make me go back and forth between the pages. Jesus Christ.
Oh, sorry.
The Sanctus is 55. We'll talk about him in a second.
55?
55. So the Nexus, average stat line, nothing to be talked about, and he's armed with an auto pistol. So he's not there for shooting or doing anything. He's there for his rules.
What's he there for then?
He's there for his rules. He's not.
I thought you said he's there for his looks. I was like, ooh.
No. He's there specifically for one rule, which is called Strategic Coordinator. Mm-hmm. So after you set this model up on the battlefield, so obviously you reveal him as one of your early blips, you can select one of your other ambush markers that is on the battlefield and remove it before setting up again anywhere that is wholly within your deployment zone and more than 12 from enemy models. So it really lets you mess with that blip again, where you take it off and go, cool, I can now just pick that unit and put it anywhere I feel like, as long as it's 12 away from an enemy. It gives you essentially another decoy blip that you can use, which is really handy. He also then lets you regenerate command points, which is really handy, and he gets bonuses to that roll, assuming he's within range of other specific characters. So he's going to be a 50-point model that most Genestealer Cult armies should be fielding, because he gives you a way of getting back command points, and the characters he gets them back with, you'll probably have in the army as well. And because you are going to be spending command points at a fairly rapid pace, particularly in the early stages of the game, having him there getting back one a turn is a very handy thing to have. But just alone for that Strategic Coordinator rule, being able to move and manipulate the blips is really fantastic. And
worth the 50 points.
Well, you could even see 3 of them turning up in a list, even though you can only roll for the CP regen once per turn.
Yeah.
The ability to pick up 3 of the blips and just redeploy them wherever you feel like is potentially, in the right build, is worth... there's value there. But I definitely think one will be in just about every army. The Sanctus was the other one. Which
Sanctus or Sanctum?
Sanctus.
I wonder why I've written down Sanctum.
Sanctus is the one that everyone's seen. He's the freaky-looking dude with the big knife, and he's got a little Genestealer familiar who's got like night vision goggles on. The model...
I like the familials.
The model actually comes with a sniper rifle as well, which is his default weapon.
Yeah, but can be upgraded to daggers.
So he starts with a silent sniper rifle, and then he gets the Sanctus Bio Dagger is the other option.
Yeah. But he's got a very cool...
I really do love this.
Yeah, so he can use Perfect Ambush instead of 3 CP. He gets it for free.
Yep. He can't be a warlord. The rule's called Cult Assassin, so he can't be a warlord, but in addition, a Perfect Ambush stratagem has a cost of 0 if it's being used to affect this model. So... you can't use it on him if you've used it on another unit, because you still have to use the stratagem. Yep. The main advantage is obviously late game for him, where you combo it with Return to the Shadows, which then lets you pull him off and then redeploy him using Perfect Ambush again and again and again.
So that we've decided to call it the Sanctus Yo-Yo.
Yes, the Sanctus Yo-Yo.
Makes him untargetable.
Well, I was trying to figure this out, and it's worded really poorly, and I feel like there's an FAQ.
We've chatted about it needing an FAQ, whether it does or not. Yeah.
At the moment, I'm inclined to say it works the way it says, because a Perfect Ambush uses a stratagem in the movement phase immediately after you set up an infantry or bike unit from your army that has the Cult Ambush rule on the battlefield. So the Sanctus has that. So you could, in turn 2, say you've put him in Subterranean Assault. Subterranean Assault deploying reserve tactical reinforcements happens at the end of the movement phase. So you can put him on the table at the, in brackets, the end of the movement phase, then play a Perfect Ambush, because I've just set him up on the battlefield, which then either lets me move for free or shoot for free. So you give him the sniper rifle, you get your free shot at him straight away. Then... Return to the Shadows, use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. Well, that's convenient, because I'm in the end of my movement phase. So now I can select him. He's more than 3 inches away from any model. I just take him straight back off. And you can essentially rinse and repeat that every turn from turn 2 onwards.
So basically, you've got a hypermobile
Sniper
that's able
that
to move around and get 2 shots off.
Well, he gets 1 shot off guaranteed because he obviously enters in the movement phase, shoots, and then comes straight back off.
Yeah.
If you choose to leave him on the table for a turn, which in later turns you probably would because you're either out of CP for Return to the Shadows, or you've got him into a position where he doesn't need to, the turn that you put him back on, he's obviously shooting in the movement phase and then shooting in the shooting phase as well.
Yeah.
But the fact you can just yo-yo him on and off, I'm assuming there'll be an FAQ that says you can't return to the shadows in the same turn that you're deployed. Unless there is something in there now. I didn't see it, but I'm going to look at it really quickly while you keep talking.
That's a shame because I don't have much more to say. So, basically just that having that...
Oh, no, it does say you cannot select a unit that has arrived as reinforcements this turn. So you can't yo-yo him in the same turn, but it does mean that you'll put him down in turn 2, he'll shoot twice, then he'll disappear turn 3, and then come back and shoot twice turn 4, and then do it again turn 6.
Yeah.
Or you can do it in 1 shot turn 3, nothing. Turn 1, nothing turn 2, 2 in 3, nothing in 4, 2 in 5, which is probably the better way to do it. So you're getting more ability to target things, but the yo-yo ability there is pretty huge because that 3 CP stratagem, if you give him the bio dagger instead of the sniper rifle, using him to hunt light characters, mid-range characters, drop him in, get the free D6 move, charge in, murder something, and then hopefully pull him back off the table and get to do it again a turn later. Yeah, can't be underestimated.
So they came from below. Before we go and talk about some of the flamer bombs and
drive-by demos.
Yeah, they came from below.
That's a really good stratagem. It's again, I think it's 1 CP, or is it 2?
I believe that one is 1.
So,
I don't believe it. It is 1. I still believe it, but
so that's the one that lets you move models from blip tokens into subterranean assault. And like I said earlier, it essentially gives you 3 extra blips at that stage, because before you reveal that mark, you select 3 units. So you've instantly got 2 extra blips on the table that are decoys. I can definitely, like, for example, if you were going to say, I'm going to run a big unit of Abominants plus an Aberrants plus an Abominant and a Primus, and you're going to subterranean assault all of them, I'd actually deploy them as if they were going on the table to get those extra blip tokens, simply to then spend the 1 CP and pull them straight back off again to give myself 3 free blank blips.
It's just realised that nobody can hear me nodding.
So definitely they came from below is another one that you'll see used regularly just to mess with people in terms of deployment. Yeah. Perfect Ambush we've already spoken about, and Return to the Shadows as well is a great... they're all ones that I would expect to see regularly used. Meticulous Uprising, though, is the one that I want to talk about. Another 1 CP stratagem. Use a stratagem before you reveal an ambush marker. Move 3 of your ambush markers up to 12 inches. Still have to be in your deployment zone and all the rest of it. But again, I had one player say to me, why would I ever do that? I'll just have decoys. The ability for me to move it, then deploy it, to fill a gap or to reinforce things that I've already had to show.
Or to run and hide.
Is, again, if you've got a Knight Gallant bearing down on you, you now have the ability to bring more stuff to bear or move.
Yeah.
You can decoy things out of position. You combine Meticulous Uprising, plus they came from below, plus scanner decoys. And all of a sudden, you've just got no idea where the opponent's going to be, and you've spent 3 CP doing it. And,
yeah, it's... For me, I just kept thinking it's just all about misdirection.
Yeah.
It's just a real thinking army, and I find it fascinating, and it seems so exciting, and there is no way I could play it because I just couldn't hold all of this information in my head.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, it does seem... I'm really excited by it.
Lying in Wait's the last one, which we haven't really mentioned.
Oh, sorry, I thought we had.
Return to the Shadows we've kind of touched on. Lying in Wait, and there's another...
2 CP.
Yeah, which is 2 CP and totally worth the 2 CP. Use a stratagem when you set up a unit from your army that has the cold ambush ability.
That's why we haven't talked about it, because we're going to talk about it in the tactics thing. Yeah. But carry on.
When setting up that unit, it can be set up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 3 from the enemy rather than 9.
Yep.
but it cannot charge this turn.
Mm-hmm.
And Games
Because
Workshop,
it's lying in wait.
Games Workshop have already done a couple of preview images comboing this with a couple of things, which if you've been on the community page, you'll have seen. The first is the Flamer Bomb,
Yep.
which is basically a maxed out unit of hand
Now
flamers.
we have moved into the tactics section of this discussion.
So you're basically taking as many flamers as physically possible, hand flamers, on either acolytes or metamorphs. I would suggest acolytes because they're cheaper. An acolyte with a hand flamer is cheaper than a metamorph without one.
Okay.
Because you can deploy 3 inches or more and the hand flamer's range is only 6, 20 seems like a big thing to try and get in range. They're on 32mm bases, so you can afford to go 3 deep. You'll probably manage 3 deep to be in range.
Mm-hmm.
So you're deploying 7x3. So if you're targeting a single model, you're probably not going to get all of them in range unless it's a big model. But most infantry squads, you're going to get all 20 shooting. And then you deploy them and you shoot 20 D6 auto-hitting flamer shots that are only strength 3 with no AP, but it's still going to average out at 70-something hits. And most infantry that you're going to be putting that in front of just melt.
Yeah.
You just threw so many dice.
Yeah.
It's just not a relevant conversation. You know, if you put 10 Space Marines in front of it, they're probably all just dead.
Yeah.
And then you can combo it off with...
So this next combo is 4 CP, and that keeps the lying in wait. You can add extra explosives for another CP, Rusted Claw Cult with bikes, which is 75 points, and drive-by demolitions for another CP.
Yep, so we spent 4 so
4
far.
4 CP, and your 75 points for your bikes.
Yep, so the extra explosives lets you throw up to 10 grenades from your unit, 5 of which may be demo charges.
Mm-hmm.
So what you would do is in this case, we're talking about 5 Adelan Jackals with demo charges, because that's 75 points and dirt cheap.
Yep.
You pop extra explosives, which lets all 5 of them throw grenades. You also pop drive-by demolitions. Use this stratagem before a Rusted Claw Biker unit from your army shoots in your shooting phase. Until the end of the phase, add 1 to hit and wound rolls made for attacks that with this unit's grenades. After this has been resolved, all of it can immediately make a move as if it was the move phase but cannot charge. So what it'll let you do is pop up these things, because they're bikes, they can be in ambush. You pop them up 3 inches away from the enemy. All 5 of them throw grenades that are now hitting on 3s because of that drive-by demolitions.
Mm-hmm.
They're strength 8 grenades because they're demo charges, which means they're going to be wounding on, against a knight, they're normally wounding on 4s, but they get +1.
Mm-hmm.
So they're now wounding on 3s, and against anything that's toughness 7 or less, they're wounding on 2s.
Yep.
Then I think they're neg 3 and D3 damage each. So you're getting 5 D6 grenades. So you get 1 D6 per grenade you throw. And then the demolition charge, grenade D6, strength 8, neg 3, D3. They're only used once per battle, but I could hazard a guess that after you do this, that unit's not going to be there anyway.
Kind of only need to use it once.
So for 75 points, you're dropping 5 D6 shots, hitting on 3s, almost always wounding on 2s, or at worst wounding on 3s. Neg 3 means most things aren't getting a saver. If they are, it's a 6. And then they're doing D3 damage per thing. So when you start talking about the rule of averages, you start going, okay, that's about 21 shots. It's about 14 hits. Against a knight, that's about 10 wounds. They get a 5 up in vol from their ion shields, but in reality, most things are only getting a 6 up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're doing D3s after that.
Yeah.
Like that's 10, 12, 14 points of reliable damage for a 75-point unit that then buggers off 14 inches after doing it.
Yeah.
Or just lines itself out and screens with themselves. And if you do it with a bigger unit, say you take a maxed out unit of Adelan Jackals, still do the same thing, but the other 7 in the squad will have 5 more sets of grenades, albeit only at strength 4, but they're wounding a knight on 5s instead of 6s.
Mm-hmm.
And they're wounding everything else in the game on 4s. And you'll still then, after those, you've got 2 other models that are shooting shotguns or auto guns or whatever they are, and then you potentially have wolf quads as well, which will then have mining lasers or clearance incinerators. And this unit costs you 250-ish points, and you've got 15 or 16 of 15 of them? 15 of them. That drive-by demolitions combo with Rusted Claw, it is a little bit of a gimmick, but there's almost no way of stopping it. You just have to, unless someone decides to use Agents of Vect, or in the a plan centuries in the making, the Vect equivalent in the Genestealer Occult book, to stop one of the stratagems, which is, I suppose, one of the biggest weaknesses of this codex, is that a lot of the scanner decoys happens in the deployment phase, so you can't stop that with Agents of Vect. But a few of these plays, because it's actually in the turn, your opponent could turn around and Vect you if they have Agents of Vect.
Yeah.
It is 4 command points for the Eldar player to do that, and if they're stopping me messing about with moving something 12 inches or stopping a perfect ambush from my Sanctus, but they're spending 4 command points to do it for a 55-point model, I'm kind of okay with them using that as a resource, because I'm going to out-command point them anyway, because the Eldar are way more expensive. And the only time it's going to be really messy is if it's Genestealer Occult versus Genestealer Occult, when you've got 2 people deploying a wall of blips.
Yeah.
And
that'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it gets real bizarre real quick, because in my movement phase, I then deploy everything and move, and then you have to deploy everything.
Yeah.
So you still ultimately want to go second in that scenario. But you then start getting strategic ambush and meticulous uprisings and all this stuff back and forth, where you have your whole army just showing up here, there, and everywhere. And that would get real messy real fast. It's kind of like the old Soulburst rules for Inari back in 7th edition, where you end up down a rabbit hole of countering and co-countering different stratagems. And I could see those games taking a long time. But the whole point of this army is to mess with the initial stages of the game, the deployment phase and the opening 2 movement phases.
So I know we've said it however many times, but you can't underestimate the importance of that deployment.
No,
so
not at
just
all.
chucking blips down on the table, you're actually missing out on a huge impact that you can have, and a huge ability to manipulate that game. And I think one of the things that we were talking about when we were sort of making some notes for this was that if you just want a big horde of monsters, then this is not necessarily it's not necessarily the army for you.
No, if you just want to swarm the board with combat models, Orcs do it better.
Yeah.
Because they're cheaper and therefore more numerous. And ultimately, the 6-point Orc Boy is better in combat than the 7-point Acolyte.
Yeah.
The whole point of the Genestealer Occult is to control these early parts of the game where you don't know what you're fighting and where it is until it's not too late, but it puts you in a position where you can't ultimately bring your best weapons to bear most of the time, because you've had to take calculated guesses. And obviously the best players are going to look at the army lists, look at the blips, and then make some educated guesses.
Yeah. But I do feel like a Genestealer Occult army is definitely more suited to a more experienced player.
I suspect there's going to be...
Doesn't seem like a starter army.
No. I mean, between the amount of models that you're going to need for these units, I mean, the Acolytes came down... I mean, an Acolyte with a hand flamer now costs the same as the hand flamer without the dude carrying it in the index. So, when you can get 20 Acolytes with basic war gear for 140 points, when they used to be nearly twice that, the model count has gone up significantly, and it's got so many layers at the front end that, you're right, anyone picking it up new to 40k is probably going to be disappointed, because they're going to think they've got all these cool blips. And
I don't know that it's that they're going to think that they're going to be disappointed. I just think that it is so complex, and there's so many different things to hold on to, and to, that they work in combination, and everything in 40k works that way.
Yeah.
But
this more than most.
Exactly. It's that extra layer of subterfuge and manipulation that goes with it. Definitely feels like you need some experience playing the game first before you start on something like this, unless your brain happens to work that way.
The worst thing I think that players starting this army are going to find is, because you're placing blips in the deployment section of the game, it's quick.
Yeah.
If you've got 20 units, you've got 20 blips.
Yeah.
You're putting a token down, and your opponent's having to deploy models. And then when it comes time for you to actually deploy, unless you know what your plan is,
that's it.
Now all of a sudden you're going to essentially stop the game
while you try and
look at the table
out.
And go, okay, so I've got a blip over there. I don't know. I'm going to have to... What's that one that lets me move blips? It lets me... and I can see that the opening phases for a Genestealer Occult player, unless they've prepared themselves and gone and are actually, when they're placing those blips down, already
really
planning,
knowing what they're doing,
the rough look of what the table's going to look like, could get to the start of when they have to deploy their army and go,
Oh dear.
I got to think about this
I
now.
wonder what I'm going to do now.
And I think that's going to be the difference between making the army work and not, because
It's the ability to think on your feet as well.
yeah,
To pre-plan and
have it up your
wing
sleeve
it.
so that when someone changes based on what they've done in their own turn,
Yeah.
you can adapt.
yeah.
Improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Okay, well, on that little bombshell, we've been talking about this for
Nearly an
way
hour.
too
Yep.
long. Do you have any final thoughts on it?
I'm really excited with this codex. I really, really like it. I'm going to try and get I thought I had 2,000 points of them. I clearly don't anymore with the points changes.
Oh, awesome. I still
But-
see that a Titan hasn't
Yeah, the Titan's
been
not finished yet.
undercoded yet. So
It's been too hot to undercode it.
Oh, yep, sure.
But it's definitely an army I'm really looking forward to putting on the table, and I'm going to start small, 1,000 points, 1,250 points, to kind of getting used to the way the army deploys and plays.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm expecting somewhere between 8 and 10 losses before I get any sort of viable pattern out of it. And then once I feel like they're going to be a lot like Harlequins, a lot like Drakari, certainly in the last editions of the game, where once you get the hang of them, you get a decent win rate out of them. But once...
So you need to learn them.
You need to learn exactly the sequence and how you interact with each of those things. And it'll work better against some armies than others. I mean, if you've got 200 Orc boys barreling down on you turn 1, and they've literally the width of the board, then obviously your ambush options are way more limited than if someone's fielding 20 Custodies. So you have to know how you're going to deal with both of those scenarios. How are you going to kill Knights? How are you going to kill Flyers, which is probably the biggest weakness of this codex, is how you deal with anything that's hypermobile and flying, because you can't charge them. You've got nothing yourself that can charge them. And I think that's where, if you are going to plug in other things to the army, that's where you're going to see flying hive tyrants from Tyranids added to the list, because you can afford to drop them in a Supreme Command or in a baby battalion or a patrol, and then not... like you deploy them on the table and have all these blips around them, and you can afford to do that. I think the second you try and go 50-50, your blips start... like, the more models you have on the table, the less value the blips have.
Yeah.
So a couple of the battle reports have just ignored the blips and gone straight to the models.
Yeah.
And they've... Lawrence from Tabletop Tactics did it for the first one, and he explained very clearly why he did that. But I think a lot of us, when we watched that video, wanted the blips there.
Yeah.
To have him speak out the thought process of where he was deploying them all and why. And I know that from then on, he's actually been recording games with the blips for that very reason. So it'll be really interesting to see if any of the high-end players pick it up, or go back to it if they used to play it, and then what those armies look like, because I've seen lots of people just trying to combo up massive strength and attack modifiers for different units, and I think there's way more to it than just trying to get strength 8, 9 attack patriarchs. I think there's plenty more depth to it than that. Anyway, we'll be back in a second to wrap things up. Alright, so I think this... I don't know what it'll be, because obviously at the time of recording I haven't edited it yet, but this could very easily be our first 2-hour episode, because the intro ran over.
Oh, no, I think we were about half an hour and then about an hour. So
No, I reckon that opener is going to be closer to 50 minutes than an hour.
Okay, well, let's not add more time to it, arguing how long it's going to be.
Yeah, it's going to be a long episode. Thank you very much for listening to us today.
If you made it to this point.
Yes. If you want to hear more about the Codex and actual Codex review on a podcast, we can do that. We'll change the format slightly, where we'll cut the intro down and do a proper Codex review. If you want to, let us know. We're happy to do it.
However, the next 2 podcasts after this have been planned,
Yeah,
so it'll be a while.
It'll be a little while. I'm also looking for people who would like to be on the podcast for a little special recording. I've got a script here, and I need some voices to basically... I will give you the script. You'll call in via Skype or Discord or some other method of dialing in. I'll hit record on the software, and I'll record you saying a couple of lines, and then you'll go into an opener for another episode I have planned as well. I think I need 6 different voices. So if you're interested in being involved in that, send us an email or hit the Contact Us tab on the website, on the Facebook page, and let us know you'd be interested in having your voice in a well, it'll probably be a 3 to 5 minute audio drama that I've got planned.
Okay. Also, just want to, sorry to change the subject there, just want to address that we were halfway through a discussion in the previous podcast around, I guess, what it means to be a TO and some of the things that we think about. So we haven't forgotten to finish that episode. You just got excited about this codex and wanted to talk about it. And then we had a couple of other podcasts planned for the next 2, so we'll get back to it after that.
We've still got a CanCon wrap-up to do, and we've got a couple of other interviews we've got to do as well. So, we've got plenty of content for the next little while.
Yeah.
But we're going to leave it there for today so as to not hit the 2-hour mark as much as I'd love to.
But our children can't walk home, so
no.
we do need to finish talking so we can go and get them.
Yep, so we will see you for the next episode. Until then, take care and we'll see you soon.
And happy gaming.
You've been listening to the Objective Secured podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, you can visit our website, objectivesecured.com.au. You can find us on Facebook, Facebook.com/Objective Secured, or you can email us, obsec@optusnet.com.au. Thanks for listening.